key meetings by two of Malaysia's ruling political parties this weekend after a series of electoral setbacks for the Pakatan Harapan coalition. Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim's PKR held its annual congress in Melaka, where the focus was on party unity and responding better to voters' concerns. Melaka is expected to hold its state election by the end of this year. In Putrajaya, the Democratic Action Party, or DAP, concluded that its ministers and deputy ministers will remain in cabinet. Nearly 90% of party delegates chose for their leaders to continue serving in government in a referendum earlier today. And to help us understand the two parties' positions, we are joined by CNA senior correspondent Melissa Goh, who covered the PKR Congress in Ayakuro, and Afifah Ariffin, who covered the DAP Congress in Kuala Lumpur. Mel, let's start with you. What were the key messages from Mr. Anwar and other party leaders at the PKR Congress?
Well, it is a critical juncture for Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim's party, PKR, as it decides how to move forward and move forward quickly to regain voter support before the next general election that must be held in about a year or a year and a half at most. Now, party leaders were anxious. They were dishing out strategies, focusing not just on growing the economic pie, but also how to speed up the implementation to ensure help reaches those in need quickly, regardless of race and religion. Now, Prime Minister Anwar spoke about increasing allocations for MPs, reiterating that PKR as a multiracial party will double down on its efforts to fight corruption and continue to reject identity politics, which the opposition Pakatan Harapan has been using in all its narratives to consolidate the Malay votes and defeat PH in the recent state election in Johor, and we saw it in Negeri Sembilan, and worse still, it's working with Barisan Nasional, which is PH partner here at the federal unity government. Now, as a result, the party lost Negeri Sembilan and is now left with one state, Selangor. Now, many delegates here they were upset. They were crying foul when Prime Minister Anwar insisted on working with Barisan Nasional to maintain political stability, insisting that BN chairman, the Deputy Prime Minister Zahid Hamidi, is a good friend, someone whom he can count on for support till the end of the term. Now, many delegates were not convinced. They were not buying it. Let's hear him out. Party President Anwar Ibrahim.
Apapun keputusan, dia tidak boleh didorong kerana kekesalan kita atau kemarahan kita. Didorong oleh kepentingan rakyat dan negara. Kalau terpaksa langgar, kita terpaksa langgar. Tetapi harus kita jaga perpaduan ini. Kerana hubungan pribadi saya dengan Datuk Seri Zahid masih terlalu baik.
Now, Mr. Anwar, all fired up, also insists that his coalition partner, Democratic Action Party, that's always been used as a punching bag for the opposition, PH coalition is intact and are working closer now to maintain stability in the unity government, insisting that he has the full backing of his partners in the East Malaysian bloc to go full term. Only Chief Minister of Sabah, Hajiji Noor, however, attended the opening of the Congress on Saturday.
Now, FIFA, let's bring you into this conversation. DAP has voted to keep its ministers and deputy ministers in government. What does this decision tell us about where the party stands, and what were the main considerations behind it, do you think?
That's right, Paul. So the results now very clear, right? More than 1,800 delegates voted for the DAP to remain in government compared to just some 242 of them who wanted the party to leave. And that is about 88% backing the status quo. So despite the frustrations that we have heard over the pace of reforms and after some very bruising state election results in Johor and Negeri Sembilan, there is clearly very little appetite within the DAP to, one, destabilize the government or two, walk away from power altogether. Of course, a major consideration has been, as Mel has said, political stability, because the delegates have argued that leaving the government could ultimately benefit their political opponents. And there's also the calculation that the DAP can achieve much more by pushing for change from within the federal government rather than from the opposition benches. So it's much better to have a seat at the decision-making table. But of course, this was not an unconditional endorsement of how things are going, because even among those who voted to stay, there were a lot of calls for the DAP to be more forceful and for the government to move faster on their reforms. And this was something that was acknowledged by the DAP's Secretary General Anthony Loke after the results were announced. So let's have a listen to what he said.
most delegates voted to stay. But of course, there are some critical views presented and wanted the government and the party to be more decisive and to be more assertive. So this is the kind of aspiration that have been mentioned by our delegates, and we respected that. And with that spirit, of course, and with the mandate given by the delegates, we will continue to play our role within the government.
So the message from this conference is really about continuity, but with pressure attached. So DAP is staying, but its leadership will now be expected to show all of its members that remaining in government can actually translate into results before the next general election.
Mel, PM Anwar's coalition remains intact for now, but his own party has seen the departure of a few senior leaders. How much of this is a challenge for Mr. Anwar?
Well, Prime Minister Anwar, he has brushed off the issue with, a series of high-profile departures. Now, he said a ship cannot have two captains steering. He made this remark at the closing. Now, his former party number 2, we all know Rafizi Ramli, he has quit and now leading his own reformist party called Bersama, and is all out now to fight him in a coming post in Melaka. Now, it's fielding 15 candidates even before the State Assembly is dissolved. Now, while Bersama may split votes for Pakatan Harapan, but that's not his immediate concern. The damage is limited and contained. He is now working to secure his second term in office. More alliances or shifting alliances, they may still be on the card as Mr. Anwar seeks to strengthen his position. Anything is possible in Malaysian politics, and the road ahead, he admitted, is not going to be easy.
Afifah, with both PKR and DAP now having set out their positions, what lies ahead for Pakatan Harapan in the lead-up to Malaysia's next general election?
Well, for PH, the immediate question is no longer whether the coalition stays together, because both PKR and DAP, two component parties, have essentially reaffirmed that. So the harder question is what changes from here. The recent state elections, we've seen how all these dissatisfaction among voters, whether it's about the pace of reform, whether it's bread and butter concerns, or whether PH has really delivered what its supporters expect from it in government. So before GE16, PH will really have to work out how it can rebuild that support. But it also faces a much bigger strategic question, because what does its relationship with Barisan Nasional looks like when it comes the time to fight an election? Because for DAP at least, working with UMNO is now accepted as part of this political reality. This was something that Anthony Loke also said that the delegates had endorsed in this vote. But that relationship becomes much more complicated because of that BNPN equation. And UMNO has, as we know, come out of the recent state elections a lot stronger, while its cooperation with PAS has revived this prospect of this broader Malay political alignment. So in the coming weeks, what we will see from the UMNO General Assembly to the PAS's annual assembly in the coming weeks, those will be things that will be important to watch, particularly for signs whether this remains this tactical cooperation in individual state elections, including the Melaka state election that's coming up, or whether it will develop into something more structured heading into the next general election.
All right, many thanks for the update to you both. We've been speaking to CNA senior correspondent Melissa Goh, who is in Melaka, and Afifah Ariffin in Kuala Lumpur.